Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to Lung Transplant Nation. My name is Sasha. Today I have a very interesting conversation with a special guest. Her name is Katie Lyssand from California. She was, when she was 1 year old, she was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. And she lived pretty much a decent life, with that until she got into high school and into her late teens. She started to feel unwell, and as a result, she had to be on oxygen. So she has to have a double lung transplant. But my takeaway as well from this is her journey. Her journey is very interesting. How at first she put her name on a transplant list and then she took her name off because she was scared. It's a very interesting and compelling story. So she had a double lung transplant and she spent, a good 5, 6 years living her life, but something else happened. So please watch this episode and please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and also on Instagram at Lung Transplant Nation. So it's YouTube, Instagram, Lung Transplant Nation, and also on Spotify at Lung Transplant Nation. Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. Welcome to Lung Transplant Nation. This is Sasha again. Glad to have you on board. Today, I have a very, very special guest. Her name is Katie Lyssand. Now, Katie was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when she was just 1 year old. So she managed to live with that until her late teens, early adulthood. And then eventually she started to be on oxygen, which in turn, she had to eventually get a lung transplant. So let me introduce you to Katie Lyssand, and then she's going to tell us a little bit about herself, her background, how from 1 year old from cystic fibrosis, how she got to being under transplanted. Good morning to you, Katie. Oh, good afternoon. It's still afternoon over there. Good afternoon.
Hello. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. Yeah, you summed it up. I mean, I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at a year old. I spent my first birthday in the hospital.
Not fun.
I don't remember it, so that's okay. And my mom was a single mom. My dad had passed away just a few short months before I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. So it was kind of just her and I growing up. Lost her husband, and then shortly after, her only daughter was diagnosed with a genetic lung disease. So a little overwhelming for her.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. And that's one thing I definitely want to touch up before we finish this conversation. I like a conversation, not interviews, is touch up a little bit on caregivers, because that is so important. So you as a child, I'm sure you were aware, but did that impede you at all growing up? From your childhood, kinder, middle school, at least you probably remember middle school, high school. How was that experience being with cystic fibrosis?
Well, like I said, it was my mom and I always growing up. She's my absolute best friend, and she never made it something that I should be ashamed about. And so I was always really proud of having cystic fibrosis and managed it well. And, I would have friends come over and they would sit with me while I did my therapy, and they would know when I was going to the doctor. They would know why I had to miss 2 weeks of school to go to the hospital. So it was never an isolating feeling because I always had a lot of support.
That is great. That is great. And that's a really wonderful way to do it, because then it's, I don't want to use the word normal, but it's normalized because your friends know, people around you know, so you didn't feel like there was anything missing. You just felt like, okay, you know what, growing up, this is something I have to deal with. But as one, like, you had the acceptance, I think that helped you out a great deal, right?
Definitely. I mean, just a quick early memory when I was young, I had a best friend and he was my next door neighbor, and he came over and my mom used to set my medicine in front of me before we would eat lunch, and he grabbed my medicine and took it. And my mom said, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, Kate takes it all the time." So I just thought we were just both young, and he thought, well, she takes medicine, so maybe I should just take medicine too. So it was so normal. And, of course we made sure everything was okay and it was all fine. But that was just a funny memory that I had with him. But growing up, everything was really normal. I had agreements with my teachers, and they knew I could manage my medicine by myself. So I would just bring it with me in my lunchbox or bring it with me to school. So I had a lot of freedom with that. And everyone really just knew Katie has CF and it is what it is. It wasn't really talked about, nothing that needed a lot of attention.
That is great. That is awesome. I really think that is awesome because, for a lot of us who had issues, it's not very easy to kind of deal with it. But the fact that you had it at a very young age, I think that helped out a lot. So take us to early adulthood, late teens. What changed? What started to change for you that you felt, or your mother felt that, hey, there's something bigger going on here. So what changed?
Uh, I was in high school. I just started getting sicker. It started with some teenage drama with some friends, and I stopped taking care of myself. And I said, I don't want to do my treatments anymore. I don't want to be different. I don't want to do all of these things. And so I stopped taking care of myself for probably a couple of months, and it affected my lungs pretty bad. And I was getting sicker, and every time I was going to the doctor, my pulmonary function tests were dropping and my lung function was dropping.
Getting worse,
So
yeah.
I was noticing I was getting a little more out of breath. And um, eventually I went to the doctor. I think it was the first appointment that my mom hadn't gone with me to. And I brought one of my friends, and he sat in the waiting room, and I was at the doctor, and I walked in, and my doctor said, "Hey, Katie, I think it's time we start talking about a lung transplant." And I said, "I
Wow.
can do that?" I didn't even know,
Sure.
that had never even crossed my mind.
Mhm.
Um, so when I first heard that, I came out, I told my friend, I said, she said something about a lung transplant. And he's like, what? So then, I called my mom, and she came and met me at work, and we talked about it. And that was kind of the beginning of the journey.
Wow. I mean, that must have been, especially for a young lady in, high school and so forth and so on. That must have been like kind of like a wake-up call, right? I mean, just, thinking about that.
Yeah, it was a big wake up call. I think just the biggest thing for me was like, I had never even heard of lung transplant. Like, of course, I knew people had
Sure.
heart transplants, liver, kidney, but I had just never even thought that was a reality for me because I never had had any friends with CF that had had a transplant. So
Mhm.
I didn't know that that was a thing. And
Yeah.
then when I heard it, I said, oh, okay, I am getting really sick, apparently, sicker than I realized.
Wow. Okay. So now when the doctor presents you guys with that option, um, so take us from there. I mean, I'm assuming that it was a very scary situation for a young lady, and I'm sure even for your mom as well. But take us through that thought process. What did you do? Did you take some time to think about it and said, well, I'm not gonna do this, or so what makes you, from that initial conversation to be like, okay, I need to do this? Was it a question of like you were on oxygen and your oxygen saturation was getting, worse and worse? Or was it a combination of both? It was like, okay, I need, eventually, if I need to get better, I need to consider this.
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, at this point, I was not on oxygen. I was still working part time. I was going to school full time, trying to still maintain the life that I had had all those years where I was able to do those things. And I didn't really want to admit to myself how sick I was. So I think it took a good long time for me to say, like, okay, Katie, you're really sick, and like you probably should start seriously considering this. Like it had always been in the back of my mind after she had mentioned it, but
Mhm.
I think I was very comfortable with the amount of sick that I was, and I kind of knew what it would take to make myself feel better.
Okay.
Like, if I do this treatment, I'll feel a little bit better. Whereas I was like, if I have a transplant, I don't know what I'm going to feel like after that.
So basically, you were compromising within yourself in your head that, hey, listen, I've done this before in a sense. I can maneuver. So I definitely can understand that. So what was there a factor that I guess it was a little scary too, because like you said, you don't know what the other side was going to be like. So what did your doctor tell you, or what made you say, okay, I'm gonna get myself listed? Take us through that process, please.
Yeah, I had a lot of, I mean, I'm really close with all my family, my aunts, my uncles, my friends, my cousins, my whole family. I'm very close with them. And so once we had mentioned to them, my doctor said I'm going to need a transplant, it was a lot of talk of like, when are you going to do it, Kate? When are you going to do it? When are you going to get on the list? You're going to get on the list soon. You probably should get on the list, because I was getting sicker and it was getting hard to shower and it was hard for me to walk up and down the stairs. And you know, I was getting to a point where my doctor's like, let's start thinking about oxygen. And I was very anti oxygen. I didn't want anyone to see me with it on. I didn't want anyone to know how sick I was, because CF is really an invisible disease. You can't look at someone and say they have CF. But once you put an oxygen cannula on my face, people are going to be like, whoa, that girl's really sick.
It's funny you said that, and you were a fairly young lady. I mean, I was an old man already with grays, when the truth of it all, because I have idiopathic pulmonary hypertension, and it got so bad I had to be on oxygen. And let me tell you something, I was already in my 40s, and you were right. There were places I'm like, either I didn't want to go because I didn't want to see people, people see me on oxygen,
Yeah.
or I'll put it in the car to, because I have like a little portable. I invested
Mm-hmm.
in portable, and I'll go places. But once I get there, I'll take it off. I mean, it's silly when you think about it, just silly stuff. But at the time, I just wanted to feel like, hey, I'm still here. I'm still strong. I still can do things. I'm just trying to fool myself, basically, to be honest with you. So I can definitely empathize with what you're saying, because it took me a while to really accept it. And obviously, in the beginning, when it was a little easier, as it got worse, I'm like, okay, that's it. I don't care anymore.
Right.
but,
Exactly.
but,
I think I
but
had the
yeah,
same thing.
but yeah, I definitely can empathize with that. Okay,
Yeah.
so
So I
uh,
ended up needing the oxygen. And, at this point, I'm a senior in high school. And so I'm like, okay, how am I going to? I got to get over this real quick, because I know, once I eventually succumbed to needing oxygen, I was like, well, this does make me feel better. I
mhm,
can breathe better. I'm not as tired. And so I was like, all right, well, the people that like me are going to like me with oxygen or without. So
there you go.
so
Mhm.
I strapped it in a backpack. I also had a portable concentrator, and I put it in a backpack and I brought it to school with me. It was scary, of course, the first time I brought it, but I think it kind of eased my mind. One day I remember someone, I was walking by and he was like, hey, and I didn't know him, and I just said, hi, like, hey, and he said, is that a scuba tank? And I said, no. And it just kind of made me laugh. And I was like, you know what? People don't have any clue of what's
Um,
going on. And so I'm just going to let it go. Like I said, I have great friends that know me and love me, and they're there to support me. They would carry my oxygen if it was too heavy or if I was tired. The person I carpooled with would drive to the front of the school so I didn't have to walk all the way across campus. So I had so much support that it was what it was. And
yeah,
then I was living with oxygen for a few months, and still in the back of, or chirping behind me was my family, like, what about the list, what about the list, what about the list? And I think I got to a point where I was just really kind of sick and tired of hearing everyone say it, and I was like, fine, let's do it.
I put myself on the list.
I'll
Yes.
put myself on the list. So I did. I put myself on the list, and I was terrified. Every time my phone would ring, I would jump. My heart would race. Every time I would, my mom's phone would ring, I'd be scared. Every time I would go to the doctor, I would be scared. And part of me, I got to a point where I said, I don't think I want this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy because there's so much anxiety. You're right. I mean, I was laying in the hospital, and I was already in a hospital because my breathing was so bad. I was on high flow oxygen, 24/7, and I got scared. I was on the
yeah,
list since March. I got scared. So, but go ahead. Yeah, I totally
yeah.
understand.
And so I said, this is not, I don't feel right about this. And I don't like how I'm feeling. And I remember the biggest thing was that I knew 4th of July was coming up. And as twisted as it is, people drink and drive, and people, accidents happen on the 4th of July. And I was like, am I going to be prepared for that call? If something were to happen to someone on the 4th of July and they call me and say, You
Wow.
got your lungs. And I said, no, I'm not ready. And so I called my doctor and I said, take me off the list. I don't want to be on the list. And my mom was mortified. She
Wow.
was so scared, wasn't angry with me, but
Mhm.
was like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? But
Yeah.
she also knew at this point I was 18 and she really didn't have a say in it. And she's like, you have to be ready. Like, we can all be ready for you to get your lungs, but if
Sure,
you're
sure.
not ready,
Yeah.
then that's what matters. And so,
And absolutely, and I think I totally, agree with that because, you know, like there's a saying, an old saying that says you can bring the horse to the water, doesn't mean it's gonna drink it. So
exactly.
you have to accept it. You have to know when you're ready because it's not just yes, it's a physical thing, but mentally, I always try to tell people, whoever's gonna, listen, the mental aspect is so key because if mentally you're not in it, it will be tough. It'll be a lot tougher than anticipated. So take us to okay, you finally put yourself on the list. Well, you took yourself off, and then
Yeah,
what happened? I guess I'm assuming you probably got worse. You decided to, yeah,
I did. Yeah, I mean, I was getting sicker and I was at the point where I'm like, Mom, I need you to wash my hair when I'm in the shower. I can't even wash my own hair. Like, I can barely brush my own teeth because I get out of breath. I remember trying to take nail polish off of my fingernails and getting out of breath doing that. And I was like, what kind of life is this? Like, all I do is sit and watch TV. And when I get up to go to the bathroom, that's my exercise for the day because I get so out of breath just walking across the house.
wow,
And I think at that point, I said to my mom, like, I think I got to get back on the list.
okay,
And
okay,
I remember telling her that, and I remember like seeing the relief in her face, but not, she didn't want to look like excited because she was like, "Oh, it's your decision."
yeah,
So
yeah, and cross finger, cross the
exactly.
yeah,
And so I remember I actually put myself back on the list on Valentine's Day in
oh wow,
2017. And
okay,
I kind of said to myself, I'm going to be my own Valentine this year and do something really special for myself.
beautiful. There you go.
And then it was a short wait for me. It was exactly 3 months. Um, I got my call May 13th at about 11 p.m. and had my surgery on May 14th, 2019.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I remember getting the call. I was asleep and I heard my mom wake up and I heard her on the phone and she said, "Yeah, this is Kathy." And okay, yeah, yep. Okay, we'll be right there. And I was laying in bed going, we don't go anywhere at 11 o'clock at night. Where are we going? And she came in and was like, Kate, they have lungs for you. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then that was kind of like the
Mhm.
beginning of my transplant.
Okay. So once I mean, I guess, they do the test, they tell you, it's a match, which is always, I mean, did you have a dry one, by the way? Or did you just, that was, that long, that was it?
I was really lucky. I did not have a dry run. I got the
That's,
call. I met my doctor. He said, I saw the lungs. They look really good. And they wheeled me off. I mean, I think I was at we rushed to get to the hospital. And then it was a lot of waiting. So you
oh
rush
yeah,
to
oh
get
yeah.
there. And
All
then,
the blood tests, all the
right.
X-rays, I mean, you name it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So I got that call at 11 o'clock on the 13th, and then I had my surgery at 12:45 in the afternoon on the 14th. That was the last picture that they took of me. You can see the clock in the background. It was with my anesthesiologist and wheeled me off.
Okay. So take us real quickly post transplant. When did you kind of like know, wow, I can breathe on my own? I mean, how did it go, by the way? Let's just say briefly summarize. How did the surgery go for you?
I mean, I was asleep, but
Absolutely. No, no,
yeah, no, but my family,
once you came to yourself, your
yeah.
senses, yeah.
Um, I woke up and I remember having a trach or being intubated.
Mhm.
Um,
I still got
and
my
I didn't like,
here.
oh yeah, I didn't have one here. I was intubated through my mouth.
I had both. It was weird.
Did
I had
you?
this one too. Anyway, that's
Yeah.
a separate
Yeah.
conversation.
I mean, I remember I had I was intubated. I had an IV in my neck. I had IVs in both arms.
Mhm.
I remember waking up and kind of looking around and then like starting to gag because I was like, I don't like this. Like, this is not for me.
It's a strange
Uh,
feeling.
yeah. So that was kind of scary, of course. Um, I think I only was intubated, I think maybe 12 hours. And
Oh,
I, yeah, I remember writing notes to my mom. They gave me a whiteboard or a piece of paper or something. And we always laugh. She's like, all you wanted to know is what time it was. And you kept going like this, like pointing to your wrist. And so that's all I was thinking about. I just wanted to know what time it was and
oh.
what day it was. And eventually I was extubated. And then, um, I think I tried to talk and I couldn't get any words out. I had no voice. And then that kind of was like, oh my gosh, I'm a talker. So I was a little worried. Um, some people have had that profound moment of taking their first deep breath. I don't really remember having that. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I did remember because they still left the cannula, to my nose, but there was no oxygen there. I didn't know that.
yeah,
So, and they were like, well, how you doing? I'm like, I'm okay. It feels kind of, strange. Like I feel like my chest was hollow. Like, I said, well, just take your time, and breathe. I'm like, well, so how many liter of oxygen I'm on? I said, you're not on oxygen. I turned around, like I said, I'm like, oh wow. But yeah,
yeah.
that
They definitely did the same thing to me because I kept saying, I need it, I need it. And I think it's because I had had it for so long. It was my security blanket. And,
psychological. Yep,
my
absolutely.
nurse kept turning it down. And, I said, you can turn it down. Just like, don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Mhm.
And then she came back maybe that night and she said, you want to know something? And I was like, what? She said, I've had your oxygen off all day and you've been totally fine. So do you want to take it off now? And I was like, what?
I know you did that to me too. It's a nice surprise. It's a nice surprise to have
Yeah, really
because
nice.
I used to get a lot of I used to get anxious a lot, like, have a lot of anxiety. So any little thing, I need oxygen. They said, no, you're fine. It's just other
Yeah.
things that are bothering you, but and breathing is not an issue. Okay,
Yeah.
so how long was your stay? And once you were able to get back home, how was that for the next year or so? How was your life?
Yeah. I stayed in the hospital for 11 days.
Okay.
And then after that, they had me move into the apartments that are right across the street from the hospital. I had it at Stanford Hospital.
Okay.
And they told us, you're going to have to live in these apartments for 3 months.
Mhm.
And so my mom and I moved in, and I think we were only there for like 2 weeks, and we were going to the doctor every 2 days, I think. And they were like, you're
Sure.
doing so well. And so they let me go home. And one of like a really cool memory for me is we live in an apartment that has stairs to get up to the apartment. And
Okay.
a lot of the people that lived in the complex with us were outside and having a barbecue. And I got home, not to celebrate or anything, just they were just outside because it was a nice day. It was May. And I got home and they were like, oh my gosh, Katie, yay. And I walked right up the stairs and I didn't stop and I didn't hesitate. And everyone was just so impressed. They were clapping and happy for me. And so it was a really cool moment. I was really excited.
Well, that is awesome. That is awesome because it looks like you didn't have to do too much rehab or anything like that. Because like I try to tell people, like everybody's experiences are different. Like you stayed for less than 2 weeks, post op, post surgery. Some people like even within a week they're able to go home. So everybody's different. Compositions are different. Because I remember, for me, I literally lost 50 pounds overnight for
Wow.
surgery. I mean, that's how blunt because they had to do a lot of blood work. I was on ECMO. I mean, it was crazy, but somehow that 50-pound plus another 30 went back. but
That's okay. You can breathe now. That's okay.
that's the easiest diet I ever had in my life, just a
Yeah.
double lung transplant and you lose 50 pounds overnight. But on the serious side, it's, you know, people are different. So it looks like you were able to really kind of get back on your feet. So can you fast forward real quickly, for the next year or so, how was your life? I mean, I'm sure it was different from when you were on oxygen and you didn't have an
Yeah.
oxygen anymore. So were you able to like really do things and be out there? So tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah. as soon as I started to feel like myself again, which I think probably took a month, 2 months maybe, I wanted to get back to work. I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to do things. I didn't want to sit at the house and watch TV. I'm like, let's go somewhere. Let's do something. Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a run. Let's go for a hike. Let's go travel. Let's do all these things. And so I was busy. I was meeting people, and I was back at my restaurant job. I worked as a waitress, but I loved it because I could run around that restaurant now, and I wasn't having to say, can you carry this for me, it's too heavy, or
Awesome.
so I think I started going to the gym. I quickly realized I hated the gym and didn't want to be there, but just the fact that I could do it. And I moved out of my mom's house. I moved in with a roommate, and I was starting to be independent and not
Of your
rely.
life, you were in control 100% of your life. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
that must have felt great, to go and obviously you feel like you were not limited, and I would think at the time it was before COVID, so I don't think you had to worry about wearing a mask everywhere, anything like that, right? Am I
Yeah,
correct?
I think for the first year I did wear a mask just to be careful, protect your lungs.
Yeah,
And
yeah, get your lungs acclimated to your body.
yeah, so I did for a little while, but I definitely was just living. I just wanted to do things. I always wanted to be doing something. And I was like, well, before my transplant I couldn't do this, so let's go do this. And
Yeah, listen, before I talk about bucket list, but like right now, I'm like, bucket list is happening at least
yeah,
as much as possible because it's literally a new lease on life. And listen, I always, for me, it's like when you're born, you're on a timer.
yep,
Anybody, anywhere, any living, breathing being, you're on a timer. You just don't know when the time is going to run out. So, for some of us who has a chance, like a second shot, a second chance at life, you gotta try to make it work. I'm not saying, go jump off the Eiffel Tower for crying out loud. Some people probably
I
want to
did
do
go
that.
skydiving after
Oh,
I
you
had
did?
my
Oh.
first transplant. I did do that. I did do that 2 times. It was a little bit
Oh,
scary,
great.
but really fun.
No, I'm not doing that. My daughter did that a couple of times. I'm not doing that.
Not
I
for
would
you.
love to go on a hot air balloon. I would love to,
There you go.
something, something different. I definitely have a bucket list. Okay,
Yeah,
so everything's going fine. You do your checkup, I guess, regularly and so forth and so on. Um, so you had a double lung transplant,
I
and
did.
and then you were able to do things, finally feel like you're in control of your life, live your life, and everything was going great.
Yeah.
So tell us right now. I mean, we got about 5 minutes, in this first segment. So since you have your double lung transplant, have you had any other issues, any setback? Because that's part of. Sometimes it's part of it. Sometimes it's not.
Sure.
I talk to that's had their transplant for like 17 years and so on and so on. I mean, they're doing great. So
Yeah.
tell us about you.
Yeah. I mean, I was busy living. I traveled to see my grandparents that I hadn't seen in a long time. And then I was just getting sick with colds back to back. Like when I went to travel, I got sick on the plane there, and I got sick on the way home, and had a runny nose and a cough. And anytime I got sick, of course, I was always a little nervous. And I went to the doctor and said, I don't know, I've been feeling a little bit off. I've been feeling, I had to walk up a hill the other day and I got a little tired. And
Mm.
they said, oh, it's probably just from your travel. And I said, okay, they made me feel better about it. And a couple months went by. I said, I'm still feeling not great. And I went into clinic. And when my lung function the previous time had been 100%,
Mhm.
it had dropped drastically down to 60%.
Oh wow. Okay, so something definitely was going on.
Something was going on, and I was terrified.
Mm.
I said, what is going on? And so they put me on high dose steroids and said, come back in 2 weeks. And it
Did
had
you do
dropped in.
did you do bronchoscopy? Sorry, did you do bronchoscopy to look into the lungs to find out if everything was okay?
Yeah, they did do bronchoscopy, and no, there's nothing, no rejection, there's nothing. And but so they did the high dose steroids. I came
Mhm.
back, lung function had dropped another 10% down to 50%. And I was like, you guys, we got to figure this out.
Mhm.
um, and I continued that. And then did another bronchoscopy, and then they did find rejection, and we have to start photophoresis, and we want to place a port. And I was like, my head was spinning because it was so happening so quickly. I had just met a new man in my life, and
Oh,
we had been together maybe a year at this point, and he'd always been supportive, and he was like, what is going on with you? And I said, I don't know. And
wow. I mean, you finally, grab your life,
right.
by the horn, like grab the bull by the horn and live in your life. And you're like, oh my God, what's going on? I mean, wow. Okay. So tell us a little bit about that in the next couple of minutes that we have. So once they do the bronchoscopy, they get you on high dose steroids, which is never fun because you could turn into
Never fun.
the Incredible Hulk or She-Hulk, and because
Yes, exactly.
when my steroids kicks in, man, I'm like, oh God, I don't have the patience for anything. It
Right,
just
like don't mess with me. Yeah, so I mean, I did that. I was doing photophoresis 3 times a week for 3 hours a day each time, and my lung function was still dropping. And
Can you explain to us real quickly without getting too technical? What is photosynthesis for our viewers who know that
the,
term?
the way that it was explained to me is they're pulling your blood out and almost washing it,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of rid it of the antibodies and to help it so that your body doesn't recognize that the lungs inside are not yours.
Doesn't belong to it. Absolutely. I got
So
you.
they're trying to almost trick your body into being like, no,
Yes.
these are our lungs. They're not foreign.
Yes.
Don't attack them.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but photophoresis wasn't working, and my lung function kept dropping and kept dropping and kept dropping. And before I knew it, I was back down to 20% again.
Wow.
And I had a meeting with my social worker and my mom and my boyfriend at the time. And she said, Katie, you're looking at a second transplant, head in my hands, like what? And I
Wow.
said, I don't know if I want to do this. And
Wow. Okay. Okay. Wow. Well, this is a good time for us to take a little pause here. We're gonna come back with Katie Lyssand, and then she's gonna let us know, folks. Uh, well, did her lungs get better at 20%, or did she have to be relisted again and get another double lung transplant? I mean, for one, I can't wait to find out. We'll be right back with Katie Lyssand, folks.
thank you.
Folks, thank you for watching part one of my conversation with Miss Katie Lyssand. Please don't forget to like and subscribe at Lung Transplant Nation on YouTube, Instagram, and on Spotify. Now stay tuned for the part two. Thank you.